The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre a la para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
And at 5 minutes after the hour, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to you as we move through time and space. You're listening to our debut show here, the Dr. Sky Experience. We're on 77 WABC, simply expanding our minds one journey at a time. But first, I'd like to take this time out to thank Mr. Catsimatidis and family, and Chad Lopez, of course, back at Ground Zero, this radio station. And equally important, a thank you and a shout-out to Kevin, navigating this Starship Powerhouse radio station, which is heard far and wide, not only throughout the eastern part of the United States, but every part of the United States, around the world, as you hear often, in 173 countries and all 50 states. And I'm sure from our Dr. Sky Experience, we move out to the cosmos and beyond. Throughout this entire 2-hour show, we're proud to have that, ladies and gentlemen. The contact number, as always, is 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. Just in case you haven't heard of me, I've been a guest here and continue to be a guest with Mr. Catsimatidis every Sunday on the powerful signal that goes out on the Cats Roundtable, and also having done so much with the overnight, the other side of midnight with Frank Morano. And we appreciate all of you out there listening. But what does a show like this contain? Great information to open up our minds, as we mentioned before, expanding our minds one journey at a time in the great realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, and the great subject of what we call now not flying saucers, but UAPs. And we assure each one of you out there that we'll be getting some really good guests, so you can ask them, the experts in their field, and also talk about these great subjects. But I also want to be very candid and upfront with everyone. In my particular time here with this radio station, one of the great mantras and things that they talk about, and we're proud to talk about it, is truth, justice, and the American way. And you will hear during this radio show in its entirety, maybe not this week, but in the future, great stories of American exceptionalism, an important part and ingredient of this great nation, and the things that we need to salute. What are those great American experiences? We'll talk about that with you, not at you, and we look forward to your calls. 1-800-848-9222 is our contact number. And just a little bit about me, but just a little bit as we move on. If you'd like, we have a little website. It's like a one-page website, drsky.com, so you can learn much more than I'd like to go, to be humble here on the radio, not to just talk about myself. But a proud native New Yorker, born in Jamaica, Queens, having lived in the beautiful area of the beaches along that coast, right in Queens. As we lived in Rockaway Beach, moved on to Ozone Park, and then moved over to Jackson Heights, Queens. And if you remember, folks, all of you listening in the New York metro area and across the country, I'm sure, the great World's Fair that we had in the 1960s, we had great culture, and we had great experiences with different races, colors, and creeds, all celebrating in block parties, a great experience. But when my mom didn't want to cook, we went to a place on Northern Boulevard, many of you might remember, called Chicken Delight. And what was their motto? Don't cook tonight. Call Chicken Delight. And then I spent a lot of time in the radio and TV business. I was in television commercials at a young age and had to do some recording of commercials as a young boy, and moved on with an agent in New York City for television and commercials. The same agent group that I was part of was, of course, the Monkees, Davy Jones, and then we moved out the west here in Arizona. But so much to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. And during my schooling, a great opportunity that we can share with you in detail sometime in the future about our experiences in school with the discoverer of the then planet Pluto, Dr. Clyde Tombaugh, and so much more. But in this particular radio show, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do here is talk about these great subjects. And if you have questions and comments, that's why we mentioned that great number, 1-800-848-9222. And we'll get to as many phone calls as possible. But I wanted to ask everybody out there, did you get a chance to see that amazing total lunar eclipse? I hope you did. Because here in Arizona, we had some bad weather. We had a really torrential storm here, snow and rain. And the weather forecast by many of the meteorologists was, no, you're not going to get to see that. But fortunately, we had a clearing sky, and I hope you did. And how about this? Later in the program, when we bring on our very special guests, we're going to be talking about something exceptional. From the surface of the moon, as many of our Apollo astronaut friends that I've known, and maybe you've met in your lifetime, they mentioned something. From the surface of the moon, the Earth in the lunar sky, ladies and gentlemen, is 4 times the diameter of the full moon that we see here on the Earth, and that was a beautiful sight. So what happens during a lunar eclipse? Not to go through too much of the geometry and the celestial mechanics, but to keep it simple, we find out that the big Earth, 7,927 miles in diameter, blocks out the light that the moon would get simply from the powerful sun. And for the first time in history, I don't know if you've seen them, but you can Google them. They're all over the place. Firefly Aerospace Blue Ghost spacecraft did just the opposite. It got to see, for the first time in history, well, at least the first time in good, times of visibility with the high-definition cameras like 4 and 8K, it got to see what a total lunar eclipse looks like from the surface of the moon, and those pictures are quite exciting. And you may wonder, why does the moon go deep red? Well, they call it the blood moon sometimes, but a more scientific answer is, as that light, of course, is streaming around the edges of the Earth, we find out that's called refraction. And what happens very simply is that light that you see, or that they see on the moon, to be more accurate, that's something interesting, because from the surface of the moon, that big ring of light is every sunset and every sunrise, all at the very same time. But we're going to be talking about something. Right now, we know successfully that the 2 astronauts, which are not stranded on the International Space Station, but many in legacy media have reported that, and we always report truth here. And if we don't know, we'll just be as honest as we can, too. But what's really interesting about this is that Crew Dragon 10, if you haven't caught the news yet, has successfully launched to the International Space Station. And the commander of this particular spacecraft is a very interesting woman indeed. Her name is Army Colonel Anne McClain. Pay attention to that name, because she's considered to be, at least from NASA's standpoint, probably the first female that will land on the surface of the moon in the future. And what they're going to do, they're going to arrive at the International Space Station as early as Sunday evening, maybe around 11:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and do a little juggling of the crews that are up there, because Sonny and Butch have been up there too long, as probably you folks all know. So that's a very interesting story out there. But we have a lot of other things to talk about. And here we go, and we continue to talk about these great things from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, and weather. We'll get into a conversation later in a little more detail with some space experts on some of the things that are really going on behind the scenes with this particular spacecraft, and I'm sure you'll want to jump in on that conversation. This particular radio show, the Dr. Sky Experience, here on 77 WABC, doing what? Expanding our minds one journey at a time, and as we do with Mr. Katsimatidis on that Sunday morning show that goes worldwide, the Cats Roundtable, we simply what? Open up people's minds to the great mysteries that are out there in the universe, and there's so many of them. So I wonder if you had a chance to see that particular eclipse, because if you haven't, or had not, the next time we'll get to see one of these eclipses will not happen, for us, at least here in North America, till around the year 2033, and they're rare indeed. And I wonder how many of you out there have ever experienced a total solar eclipse. We know we had one last year on April 8th, and I was down in Texas reporting on this for this very radio station, 77 WABC. And if you didn't get to see that, that whole experience will happen again in Spain coming up next year in 2026. And if you really want to see a great total solar eclipse, prepare to see one in August of 2027. And here, in my opinion, is probably the best location in the entire world to see it. It would be deep in the heart of Egypt, right by the famous pyramids and you would see the sun go dark, because they usually do have very clear skies there, that would be quite exceptional, ladies and gentlemen. So what about this radio show? What are the things that we're going to talk about? So let me talk about the American, exceptional side of this whole thing, American exceptionalism. For the longest time, many of the audience may not know, I was a member of the military, have an honorable discharge from the Army, and spent time in the law enforcement world also. And people may be wondering, wait a second, this is Dr. Sky. He never talks about that. But in the realm of American exceptionalism, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to proudly talk about this, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and so much about our Second Amendment. I'm a certified instructor, firearm instructor, and can talk with you about so many of the things, and having taught concealed carry to so many people here, we'll talk about why rights are denied in some parts of the country. And it's sad to say, ladies and gentlemen, and what you might be able to do about that. And so many other great stories about American heroes and people, of course, that should be recognized in this world. As we see a lot of things happening in the world today that we may not like, but my plea to everybody out there is, you can do something, you can volunteer, you can help people, and you know what to do out there. I don't need to tell people. But it's so interesting to talk about the great stories of American exceptionalism and the things about our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our sacred Second Amendment. And here in Arizona, many people may feel when it comes to the Second Amendment, well, gee, you folks have, guns can be purchased at the Circle K or something. Well, that's certainly not the case. But why are rights denied in other parts of the country? And that may agitate a lot of people out there. And for future conversations, maybe not this particular show on the Dr. Sky Experience, as we expand our minds this particular morning, as we move on to wish each and every one of you a most happy and sacred St. Patrick's Day, one of the great celebrations that goes on not only in the United States, but we know how important it is to the people of the New York City region. And a lot of other things, ladies and gentlemen, that are happening too. And we think about this, particularly in the world not only of space. What happened to the big Starship that, of course, was launched just a few days ago by Elon Musk? Something happened. What about Starship? What about that most powerful rocket that someday will actually take people to the moon and the planet Mars? Do you think that's a waste of money? Do you really think that that's something important? And for so many people out there, you don't have to just agree with us. We'd love conversation on this. So as we move through time and space, the contact number here, 1-800-848-9222. And we're hoping to hook up in just a few moments with our first guest after we come back from the break, the first break of this radio show this morning, as we do our debut show here, the Dr. Sky Experience. We're on 77 WABC, expanding our minds one show at a time. And we're looking to hook up with a gentleman who I've known for so many years, Rob Godwin. He's an author and space journalist. He has a company called Collector's Guide Publishing, CG Publishing, or Apogee Books, and he's a go-to guy for our radio show. Why? Because not only does he have a great historical knowledge of the music industry, as he can talk about that for hours and hours and hours, but talking about our theme here with what's going on the International Space Station with the astronauts and all of the books that he's published, he is definitely a go-to guy as we talk here on this particular radio show. As we mentioned before, we'd love to hear from you, and we'll get in as many calls as we can during this 2-hour radio show. And so many experiences out there that, I'm sure, think about this, folks. What's the most beautiful dark night that you've ever experienced? Where were you? And unfortunately, light pollution, as we all know, not only the New York area, Phoenix, all big cities around the country and around the world, may prevent us from seeing something so fascinating in the night sky. But here I'm an eternal optimist, because you can actually see things, even from brightly lit cities, as we continue to talk with you. So we're up against our first break, ladies and gentlemen, hoping when we come back we'll continue with our very special guest, and many special guests, but equally important, all the things that we share with you and your questions and comments to the Dr. Sky Experience. We'll be right back.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, here at 20 minutes after the hour. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful weekend to come as we celebrate St. Patrick's Day, or for whatever reason you're celebrating. Thank you for being with us. We move now to our very first guest in our debut show. A longtime friend of mine, Rob Godwin, is the author. He's an author, I should say, a space journalist, Collector's Guide Publishing, CG Publishing, and Apogee Books. And with that, we say a hearty hello and good morning to you in Canada. Good morning, Rob. How are you?
Good morning, Steve. How are you? Nice to speak to you again.
Well, thank you for staying up. I know I appreciate your time greatly here. But let me start off with this. I hope and I pray that all the tariff things going on between, you and Canada, let's hope and pray that this whole thing can be sorted out. I mean, I realize the necessity for some of this, but I don't really dabble into the politics. But what say you? What's the flavor of what's going on there in Canada first?
Well, it's as you pointed out, it's quite difficult. But I have family in the U.S. My brother is an American citizen.
Yes.
So it cuts pretty close to us. We're very close and constantly bouncing backwards and forwards between the two of us, and hearing it from both sides right now. So it's quite difficult, really.
Well, Rob, the good part of this interview again, and I wish you the best because. Ladies and gentlemen, I've known this gentleman for probably Rob? You and I know each other for maybe 20 years or so.
Yeah, at least I think, yeah.
No, and you've been a great resource for great guests. But let's talk about a little bit about your background, okay? You're born in England. You come to the United States. You have a great legacy of the whole rock and roll industry, managed bands. Now, wait a minute, folks. You're probably wondering, what does that have to do with him in space? But am I correct, Rob, when I read this, or at least I hope I read it right, that once you saw Led Zeppelin, that became like a most amazing experience.
Yes, my first aviation experience, yeah.
That must have been amazing.
Yeah, it did change my life. It was I was a teenager at the time, and it was the most extraordinary thing I'd ever seen, and led me down a path of wreckage and destruction.
Well, let's cut to the chase on this one because I know, and again, I'd like to keep you here for a while because I know we have some callers on the line, and I hope many more call in. The contact number is always here, 1-800-848-9222. But let's talk a little bit about this. The astronauts that are in space, your take on it. I don't want to say anything on this anymore. The media, of course, says, they're stranded astronauts. Give us your best recollection of what is going to happen and give us your perspective of how they're going to return, a little more details than I've read.
Well, I think it's inevitable that they're going to come back on a Dragon eventually. Mm-hmm. I don't know that either of them have been particularly perturbed by the idea of being up there as long as they have. It seems to be, you train your whole life for this, and then you get to go up there thinking you're going up for a few days, and you get to spend months and months up there.
Yeah, right.
I think other than missing their families, they're probably reveling in it right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is interesting because people, you tell us this story. These are well-trained test pilots. These are not people that fold easily. So I would think in the back of their minds, tell me yes or no, they probably had this all planned contingency just in case, right? They have to be ready.
I think so, yeah. I mean, when you're the first to actually fly a new manned spacecraft, you've got to be expecting all kinds of things to go wrong. I think they probably weren't anticipating being stuck up there as long as they have been. But again, I think it's probably something they're just really thrilled about. They may be getting tired of it now, but certainly, how many people get the opportunity to go up at all, much less go up there for a year or something?
No, absolutely. It probably wouldn't be me. How about you? Would you do something like that? I mean, would you obviously not want to be an astronaut? Would you really do that? I mean, tell me. What was your
Oh, sure. If I could go, I would definitely go. Wow. Whether I could stay up there for a year or not, I don't know. But probably help my bad back being in 0G for a year.
Well, blessings to you, my friend. Let's see if we can go to the callers here because we don't want to have people just walk away because we do respect that. I don't know. Do we have Vinny on the line this morning? If you are there, Vinny, good morning to you and welcome to the Dr. Sky Experience. Are you on the line with us? Maybe Vinny left. Well, we'll continue here. It's interesting, though, Rob. Let's talk about the books that you, of course, have written here. Apparently, I'm reading that you wrote an Apollo 8 book, and that was a big deal because some astronaut, some guy who claims he was the second man on the moon, he wanted you to do more than just to talk about Apollo 8. Tell us that story.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. I mean, it's one of those stories of being in the right place at the right time. I had been invited to go to the Apollo 7 anniversary in Los Angeles by my brother, who at the time was on the board of the National Space Society. And he said, if you come on out here, you might get to meet some of the Apollo 7 crew. And I arrived that night and went into the hotel restaurant for dinner and suddenly found myself sitting down for dinner with Buzz Aldrin and his son and Walt Cunningham from Apollo 7 and his wife Dorothy, and Andy Chaikin, who you may know as the guy who wrote From the Earth to the Moon.
Absolutely, a great book.
And I sat there for 2 hours spellbound listening to these icons of history talking about space. And at the end of the evening, Buzz turned to me and said, "So what do you do?" And I said, "I'm a writer and publisher." And he said, "Could you do me a favor?" I didn't even know what he was going to ask me. I just said yes immediately without having any clue.
Wow.
And he said, "We've got an anniversary for Apollo 8 coming up, and would you do a book for the Black Tie Dinner in Chicago?" And I said, "Absolutely, I'll do it." I had no idea what I was going to do, but I said, "Yeah, I'll do it. My only price is introduce me to the crew." Yes. And so he said, "Done." And I had 72 hours to get that book done, to get it printed in time for the event. And that's another story in itself. I won't bore you with the details, but we got it there in time, and Buzz was good to his word. He introduced me to Frank Borman and Jim Lovell and Bill Anders. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the evening, Buzz came over to me and he said, "You did good. Apollo 9's anniversary is in March."
There you go. Here's another book.
And that's what started Apogee Books.
Folks, if you're just joining us here on the Dr. Sky Experience, our debut show here on 77 WABC, expanding our minds one journey at a time. Our very special guest for this particular segment, hour number one, is author, space journalist, and a good friend. Believe me, if you wanted to ask questions about the rock and roll world, I think this guy could take off for hours. His name is Rod Godwin. His company, if I have it right, I hope I have it, cgpublishing.com for Apogee Books. Is that still a correct
presentation? That's correct, yep.
Good. You know, talk to us about this, because I'm so fascinated about the people that went to the moon. I don't know how many listeners out there of the Dr. Sky Experience ever had an opportunity to meet one of the moonwalkers, or many. And you know what, Rob? I am sure, and I got to ask you this question right now, and due respect to anybody that doesn't believe what we're doing here and talking about, not about space, but about the big question about, did we ever go to the moon? Let me hear it from you, because it's almost like an insult question to ask you, but what do you tell people? Because I know what I tell them, but you're the guest. What do you tell them when that question pops up? I mean, do you smirk? Do you laugh? No, you're a gentleman. What do you tell people as evidence?
I think you're right to point out, it depends who's asking the question. I think the most interesting time I was asked that was in front of 700 high school kids. And a kid in his early teens got up from the front row and asked me the question. And when I began to answer it, he had obviously been primed up with all of the other questions that go along with that. And he stood there very, politely and let me talk. And so I got to answer that question in front of about 700 kids, which I think was the most rewarding time that I ever answered the question. But he had all the different questions to ask about why you can't see the stars in the photographs and how could they survive the radiation and, going through the Van Allen radiation belts and all this kind of thing. And, I'm willing to talk all day long about that to somebody if they want to hear it. But occasionally you get people who get very angry. And in one occasion, I got to the point where the person who was discussing it with me couldn't agree that our version of reality was the same, and I mean literally our version of reality. He said,
sure.
Maybe what you're seeing is not the same as what I was seeing, and I said, well, I have no answer to that.
Well, you know something, you're becoming very popular here, but the honest truth of the matter is, I just tell them this way. We brought back some 843, if I'm not exact on the number, forgive me, lunar rocks. There was no Amazon, there was no FedEx, and there was no UPS then, and they are not, totally similar to rocks on the Earth. Ask Dr. Harrison Schmitt, but that's another story for itself. But, folks, if you're on the line and we haven't gotten to you, we'll do the very best when we come back from this hard break at the bottom of the hour coming up. And our very special guest, just in case you're still out there driving, hands on the wheel, as the big, St. Patrick's Day celebrations begin, drive safe, and, of course, always protect yourself that way by doing the right thing. But a very special guest, Rod Godwin. He's a space journalist. He's a friend of mine. He's an author, and he has a lot to say here, ladies and gentlemen. And we see the caller lineup coming through here. So if you're there, please do the very best you can. We respect you. LQ in the Bronx. We got Williams in Yonkers. We got a whole bunch of people on the line right now. But, Rob, I think that's what we're doing right now. We're coming up to that hard break. And I appreciate your time to the top of the hour, with much more coming here on our debut show, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Dr. Sky Experience, where on Talk Radio 77 WABC, doing something a little different out there. We dispense with the politics of the day, even though that's important with all the great hosts that are on this powerhouse radio station. We dispense with much of that until we maybe get into conversations in future iterations of the show when we get to talk about American exceptionalism, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and, of course, our Second Amendment rights, part and parcel to what makes America great. But, Rob, we also love everybody in Canada. I've never met a nasty Canadian in all the time I've ever been around. No, I'm serious.
Hey, we love Americans. What can I say?
Maybe we can cut a deal on the air here. Right? But, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back with our special guest. Your questions and comments. We'll get as many of the callers, I promise, in on the line, 1-800-848-9222. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
34 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to each and every one of you, no matter where you are on planet Earth. As they say here, and very proud to repeat it, heard in 173 countries in all 50 states. And ladies and gentlemen, our very special guest to the top of the hour, a good friend of mine. And ladies and gentlemen, we reintroduce Rob Godwin, author, space journalist. But let's go to the phone lines because we know so many people out there have questions. Let's say good morning to Vinny in New Jersey. Are you with us? Good morning.
Dr. Sky, you hear me?
I clear you clearly, sir.
Okay. Hey, listen, you mentioned something about Davy Jones. What was that about?
Well, without naming the agency, I was part of it when I was young. I mean, I don't like to talk too much about myself. I was in the same agency that the Monkees' Davy Jones. He was the big star of that agency. So when I was a little kid, I had to drag around my big, picture portfolio and, song, dance, and all that to different people that would hire me. And my mom was a stage mom, God rest her soul, but that's what I did. But that's the connection right there. But, hey, do you have any comment about what we're saying? Because this is the coolest stuff ever, I think, as far as talking about what's beyond this planet. How about that, Vinny?
Well, it's a pretty big world, man. I mean, I'm not into a lot of that, what do you call it, Big Bang theory. I don't know.
It's a complicated thing. I don't think anybody understands it, Vinny. But you know what?
Of course not.
Yeah. No, they don't. But in the future, I'll tell you what, when we have Rob back here, since you're talking about music, I'm sure he'll entertain us for hours with stories about the music industry. So I hope you'll call us again. But good morning to you and happy St. Patrick's Day. Thank you so much, Vinny.
I would love it. Thank you, Dr. Sky.
Brother, we love you. Let's go to Dennis now in District of Columbia. How about that? Good morning to you. Are you on with us?
I am, and thank you for taking the call. And I want to congratulate you, Steve, on your new project here. I feel honored to have a chance to say hello. And for your listeners out there, people, you have got a gold star in this radio booth, beaming out very important and interesting stories and people and guests, and I think it's very reminiscent of others who have followed in this area of radio land, and I think of Larry King. Who knows? Steve, you are doing such good work, and congratulations.
Well, Dennis in the District of Columbia, thank you for your kind comments, and hope you'll stay with us and continue to be part of the Dr. Sky Experience here. What do? We're expanding our minds the very best we know. And if we don't know something, we're going to be honest enough to tell people, because that's the only way to go. It's all about truth and honesty. Let's go to the phone lines once again. LQ in the Bronx, good morning. Are you with us this morning? How are you?
Yes, happy St. Patrick's Day, and good morning, and welcome, Dr. Sky.
Hey, thank you.
First of all, I'm impressed by you. Even biblically, it talks about, in St. Luke, the star over the major. So definitely the skies and the galaxies God created, and definitely have knowledge for us. So I'm impressed by that. My question to you is, is two things.
Sure.
What would you have done, or could have done, to prevent the astronauts from being trapped up in space? and the other one
Yes.
is as far as law enforcement with things like this made it. This officer, rest in peace, a young officer.
Yes, God bless.
Killed by that with all the advancements they have with drones and robots, police robots and things, and it's helpful, the police use it. My thing is even maybe possibly a bulletproof car, since he was shot, he was shot through the window, even though the bullets could go through the body of the car. What would be your comment on that? And that's it. And your guest also, welcome to him. Jimi Hendrix was my thing back, and I'm probably more crazy than Led Zeppelin.
Well, LQ, I thank you. And let me do this. Let me go to our very special guest to answer the first part of that question before we go to our next break, and I'll do my best to answer that other part from the law enforcement side. But let's hear what Rob has to say, and I hope you heard clearly what LQ was asking.
Was it he was asking what could be done about
what could have been done, right? So the astronauts, to prevent this long stay up there. Maybe that's a tough question to answer because nobody really knows, I guess. Well,
really, the only thing they could have done is just scheduled another Dragon launch to be sent up earlier to bring them back. I'm not quite sure why it's taken so long. I know that they had several scheduled flights and they've had some delays as well. But, even back in the 60s, there were backup plans for rescuing Apollo astronauts, although it would have been extremely difficult back then. And there were even plans with the shuttle program. So there have been contingency plans over the years. But today it's much easier, I would have thought, with the recycling of Falcon and, the Dragons being churned out like, hot dogs.
Absolutely. Let me go to LQ's question, more of the law enforcement side, and if I think I heard him correctly, first of all, our hearts go out to any law enforcement officer, man or woman, that's killed in the line of duty. It's just a very difficult question. It gets into the politics of the day. But again, these police officers, some of them have such a disadvantage today until we can get the hate out of this whole equation. And I don't know how to do that, LQ, but I did a volunteer thing for 22 years, and my brother Joe, who's probably listening to this show, I hope he is, he also was part of a thing here in Maricopa County in Arizona where we got training. And I don't know, that's another subject for another time, but it's just so sad. I really don't know how to address that in such a short time. But thank you for being with us, and I hope you'll call us again. Let's say hello to William in Yonkers. He has some questions about observing the moon, if you're with us. Good morning to you, William. How are you this morning?
Yeah, pretty good. You have my sympathy as a former Army guy. I put my time in on very big gray boats in the Pacific Ocean. Wow. And as a matter of fact, on the day of the moon landing, I was practicing amphibious operations off the coast of San Diego, and I can tell people, yes, in fact, the landing did take place.
Yes.
But in my naval training, I had to learn about a very arcane field of applied science called celestial navigation, which almost nobody knows about. And you might be able to take time to address that. But my question is, I'm normally awake a little bit before sunrise each morning, and I observe out the window to the west as I'm waking up the location where the apparent location of the setting of the moon. Like one morning, like Monday morning, it would be to the right end of the house across the street to the west. And then the following morning, it's to the left end, a couple of degrees further to the left end. Each morning successively this past week, a little bit further to the left again. Could you explain this as to some non-astronomers who find this rather complicated?
Well, William, you express it well, but again, looking at the night sky here in that situation, the only thing I could say, other than obviously seeing the moon in the sky, we have major planets out there in the sky, and Jupiter still dominates the sky. But later it sets into the western sky. It's pretty bright. It's obviously naked eye. But right now, Venus is your big, bone of contention out there as far as a planet that's so bright. And that is moving in toward the sun. So that could be an object, let's say, that we're seeing in the western sky just after sunset. And that it'll rapidly disappear, William, as it moves into conjunction with the sun. But I don't know, Rob, any idea what you might say on that? I think William brings up some good points. It's kind of generic because we're not there and we're not. At least I'm not an expert in celestial mechanics, but what say you, Rob? Well,
I'm glad to hear he remembers where he was when the moon landing happened. I'm sure we all do. But the celestial navigation thing, of course, it's been going on since antiquity, but people didn't really, they knew where they were in latitude, but didn't know where they were in longitude until the the early 18th century when a fellow called John Harrison invented a clock that was accurate enough to be able to figure out when noon was. They would set the clock when they left London, Greenwich, at noon, and then sail west, and then using a sextant, they would figure out where the sun was at its highest, and then they would know the local noon, and then they'd be able to figure out how far they'd traveled east or west. And, so that's been going on for 200-300 years at least. So I'm glad to know that somebody was still teaching it.
Absolutely. I know a lot of friends in the Air Force ROTC, and they would get in a T-43, which is like a modified 737, and they got up there, and that was the old school, because old school is pretty good. I mean, Rob, when's the last time you and I had a sextant in our hand? And if you were to show that to just about anybody, they would probably say, well, maybe that's something you could buy at the Goodwill if it worked at all. But am I correct? I mean, a lot of people have no idea how to use like the old slide rule. Now moving on to the thing called the sextant, which is also part of navigation.
I'm embarrassed to admit I have a collection of slide rules.
I love it. And they were made by a company called Kilfil and Esser. And how do I know that? Because I used to see a lot of the older engineers with the pocket protector, and some of those people were just so amazing. But they were very precise and serious about their work. Let's continue with the callers here before we go to another break, ladies and gentlemen, in time and space here. Let's say hello if he's with us. Alex, good morning in Brooklyn. You have a question about the astronauts in space.
Yes, good morning, Professor. I call you Professor out of respect.
Well, that's kind of you.
Good. These astronauts, I'm not talking about the current peril where they are stranded, but if are they capable of doing spacewalk? And if so, if so, what protection do they have from micrometeorites traveling at thousands of miles an hour?
Alec, you bring up some very good questions, and I'm going to defer to my esteemed colleague, Rob Godwin, on this one, because I think, Rob, through your experiences as an author, you probably have a lot more to say than I could.
Well, the thing is, when they do spacewalks, when they were doing them with the shuttle would fly in orbit with the engines facing the direction that it was heading in, so that the heaviest part of the vehicle was protecting the cargo bay. And they very rarely ever went outside the cargo bay. So if there was anything coming in the direction of the shuttle, it would hit the engines, which was the heaviest part of the vehicle, before it would hit them. With ISS, they plan these things the same way as well. They try and make sure that the astronauts are not going out in places where they, potentially could get hit by something. Because even the smallest fleck of paint has been known to leave, take a chunk out of a shuttle window. So they take precautions that way. And then, of course, the spacesuits themselves have got multiple layers, including Teflon layers inside them to try and diminish it. But, if you get hit by something bigger than, a small grain of sand moving at, 20,000 miles an hour, there's a good chance it's going to puncture the suit. So you have to kind of go out there and take your chances.
Alec, you heard that from somebody who knows way more about it than I do from his experience. But I appreciate your call and hope you'll be part of the Dr. Sky experience.
One more question.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead. Yes, please.
Oh, yes. This prediction of a star in the constellation of Orion is supposed to go nova. Sure. What is the current update on that?
Alec, here's a great question. I'll jump on this one, and Rob, of course, if you want to corroborate on it too. The star is Betelgeuse, and the star is 500 plus light years away. And we were flying with NASA's Big Sophia, Alec, the big observatory telescope, the 100-inch telescope, and we would go up for 13 hours. We would fly from California and Lancaster, California, and go, say, up maybe toward Alaska. But imaging of that, here's the problem with this star. Nobody knows specifically when this Betelgeuse is going to do its implosion. How do they know it's going to happen? It's an older star. Believe it or not, this may sound strange to people. Look this up. Betelgeuse is not a true billion-year-old star. It's millions of years old, but it's exhausted all of its hydrogen, which converts to helium, so it's using and burning heavier things. So what happens if that nuclear cycle stops, even like a trillionth of a second? It could go supernova. Nobody knows when. We know something's happening, so it could be next week or 1,000 years. But here's the point, Alec, and we got to move on. When that star goes and blows, it will be as bright as a quarter moon in the sky. And let me leave it to my good friend, Mr. Rod Godwin. Do you want to comment on anything of that, sir?
One of the things that's interesting about Betelgeuse, Steve, is that I think it was the first star that was ever imaged where you could actually see a disk.
You're absolutely right.
It's that big, and it's close enough that they were able to get an image of it like that. But it's been fluctuating a lot more recently, apparently. And
you're right.
As you point out, nobody knows exactly when it will go. It could go tomorrow. It could not go for another, as you say, many thousands of years.
Absolutely, Alec. I think that's, he gave you a much more detail. But right, you're right on that, Rob. That star had its first diameter measured as an individual disk. And look at stars in the heavens. They're infinitesimally tiny pinpoints, but 500 light years. So if that star blows tomorrow, the light's been traveling what? And folks, if you want to look this up or remember this one and amaze your friends, the speed of light is 670 million miles an hour, beating out any Tesla Plaid or any fast motorcycle that you might have or any iteration of a gas-powered car. Right, Rob? That's pretty powerful stuff. Well, we're going to come up here to another break in just a moment here. But, ladies and gentlemen, we are really appreciative of you joining us here on this radio station, 77 WABC, a brand new show here. We're so proud to be part of this radio station. And again, a shout out and a much grateful thank you, a big thank you to Mr. Catsimatidis and family. Chad Lopez, of course, on the executive side of the organization. And ladies and gentlemen, all of you out there. So as long as the good Lord permits and the health continues, we will certainly give you the best information possible. And always telling the truth here, because what it is, truth. You know, we read in so many things, and I don't want to knock mainstream media, Rob, and you're free to comment, of course, with your own opinions. But we always hear about the asteroid coming close to the Earth, and we get the story, and it's like, oh, it's the size of Taylor Swift, or 10 times the size of Taylor Swift, and it's headed this way. And I don't know. I think a lot of the journalists need to sharpen their pencil, and that's just my opinion, to do a little better reporting.
Yeah, it reminds me of the recurring stories about finding water on Mars.
Exactly.
You know, we've known there was water on Mars since virtually the time they invented the spectroscope at the beginning of the 19th century. And every time somebody finds some water somewhere on Mars, it's like it's a new discovery.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Stay with us, Rob, because we're coming up to the top of the hour. But equally important, we're coming up to another break here on this radio show. And we'll do our best, ladies and gentlemen. No promises, but we try to always be honest, and that's the only way to be. We know we have other guests on the line that are calling in, and individuals with questions like Stu, William, and Paul will do our very best to get back to you. You're listening to me, Steve Cates, Dr. Sky, proud to be here on this radio station and part of the family, the Dr. Sky Experience on 77 WABC. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online. Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hello, Nigel here. As an owl, I love to be awake all night, but allergy sufferers like you probably don't feel the same. So take Xyzal at night to relieve allergies while you sleep. Then wake up fully refreshed for a more productive day. Xyzal works fast and offers 24-hour continuous relief from sneezing, runny nose, itchy watery eyes, and itchy nose and throat, so you can enjoy doing the things you love all day long. Be wise all. Take Xyzal at night. Use as directed. Starts working in 45 minutes.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by PACE, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
52 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking this ride through time and space as we continue here from this particular time slot, midnight to 2 a.m., as we move from Friday to Saturday morning, wishing you the best for a wonderful, healthy, and happy St. Patrick's Day weekend. And we don't have to worry about the Ides of March. Where did that come from, ladies and gentlemen? Well, it was called the Idus in Roman times, the mid-month of Martius, named after the god of war Mars, and all around the death of Caesar in 44 B.C. But we don't have to worry about on this show the Ides of March. Our special guest, Rob Godwin, continues with us. Rob, before the clock runs out, we'll go to a few more callers, but before the clock runs out, I hope that this will continue, you and I having this conversation. But tell us about your company and how people can get in touch with you. And it's amazing what this man has as far as products and books. Take a good look at him. How do they get in touch with you?
Well, the website, as you pointed out, is cgpublishing.com. And we've done something like, I think, 150 or 200 space books and maybe 50 music titles over the last 30-odd years. Not all of them are still in print, but most of them are. And the regular phone business line is 905-637-5737. Happy to hear from anybody who wants to talk about space or music.
Well, Rob, you bet. And we'll get into the music conversation, I'm sure, one day, because your stories are incredible. I love to interview so many of the rock bands like Foreigner, George Thorogood, Chubby Checker. We've had all these on our other programs. But let's go to the callers in the fleeting moments that are left. Let's see if we have Don in Long Beach. Is it Long Beach, Long Island, or Long Beach, California?
Long Beach, Long Island. Long Beach, Long Island.
Good morning.
How are you, Dr. Sky?
I'm doing good, brother. Thank you for calling.
Yes. I just want to get a little philosophical. To me, there's a higher force, call it the force, call it God, and intelligence, whatever. There are two things that are unique. One of them is our intelligence,
yes,
and the other one is resources. And there's a synergy that we have here. Using our intelligence, we have resources. We can build. We can discover. We can do anything. Go into space, create telescopes, you name it, and that is going to take us who knows where. It's limitless. The synergy between those two entities. And, should there be an asteroid on its way here, we will have the resources to deflect it or destroy it or whatever it is and perpetuate our existence. So that's all I want to say. It's interesting.
Well, bless you. You bring up some very good things, but I want to give a quote from Interstellar here. It was from a poem by Dylan Thomas, and I think that Rob may know this one, and maybe you also do, and I quote, "Do not go gentle into that good night." What does it mean? Simply in English, don't give up. Do all to save our species. Do not give up on what you want to achieve. So that has a lot in the positive way. Maybe a lot of companies would use that to motivate employees, but it's all about the motivation of the species to keep our species, and that was a big part of the movie Interstellar, when Michael Caine did those words and expressed them better than I could in his great voice. Thank you for the call, and if we haven't gotten to you, ladies and gentlemen, we'll do our very best in the second hour, which is coming up very quickly here. But again, let's go back to this very interesting conversation, Rob. I mean, you've written so many books. How many would you say on the Apollo program? Because not only do you have the books in detail, you go through the transcripts of what was said back and forth, right?
Yeah. I mean, we were the first to actually get the crew debriefings declassified and published. Wow. So that was kind of fun because we knew that nobody had read any of those debriefings in 30-odd years when we got our hands on them. We've probably done a significant portion of the catalog has been on Apollo. I'd guess probably 30 books, maybe something like that. Buzz helped with the first Apollo 11 one. Neil Armstrong helped out with some of the research for a couple of the other books that we did. We did one on the X-20, which, of course, he was one of the test pilots for, and also the X-15, which he was.
Oh, my favorite, the X-20 dinosaur, right? The dinosaur.
Exactly, yeah. Neil Armstrong was the guy who did all the abort tests for that. So he was kind enough to give us some material from his museum, as he called it, to include in the books. But yeah, I mean, we worked with almost all of the moonwalkers. Dick Gordon helped out, Dave Scott, Ed Mitchell, Jack Schmidt, Gene Cernan. All of them contributed in some capacity to the books, in either interviews or whatever.
No, you're awesome, and I got to say this, and I hope I'm right. Were you the manager of the rock band The Scorpions? Is that correct?
No, I was a roadie.
Oh, you were? Okay. Well, that's still, hey, without the roadies, no show happens.
Briefly a roadie back in 1975 when nobody had ever heard of them.
The Scorpions, I love that. You know, it's so interesting. And I hope he'll come back, and I'm kind of like prodding you to come back. Why? Because I think there's overwhelming interest in this subject, not only from myself, but I'm sure it's infectious to all the people out there. But quickly, in less than a minute, what's the motivation for you in this subject? Just tell us. It could be spiritual. It could be whatever. Tell us.
Well, I think it's really, I'm fascinated doing the research more than anything. Finding out the information for myself, I think it's important to keep learning. But if I can pass on useful information to people and help out, that other caller was talking about asteroids. Yes. We actually donated a lot of the money from these books to asteroid impact research and helped to buy telescopes in the southern hemisphere that could see Earth-crossing asteroids that wouldn't have been seen otherwise. So, we've got a bunch of different things that we do.
You're awesome. Thank you so much. Rob Godwin,
Thank
you can
you.
get in touch with him at cgpublishing.com, Apogee Books. A good friend and a longtime friend, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about things that way above my pay grade as far as the ability to write these type of books and all the details. So go ahead and check him out. And ladies and gentlemen, I think that is, well, almost the end of hour number one. So stay tuned. Hour number two with the Dr. Sky Experience here on 77 WABC continues. More great guests. And if we haven't gotten to you, we'll certainly do our very best in the queue. The number, once again, to call us here, 1-800-848-9222. Thank you so much for joining us in hour number one. And if you want to check out a little more about my own background, which I don't want to go into detail here, rather save it for the callers and the experience, just simply go to drsky.com, a simple one-page or so outline of some of the things that I've been involved in, not only in the broadcast world, but also in the astronomy and space world with a lot of interesting links. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and we'll be right back. As they used to say, and we'll still say it, don't touch that dial, because more exciting things coming that literally will expand your minds on this time and space journey. We appreciate you greatly. We'll be right back.
Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to hour number two of this debut show here on 77 WABC. We talk with you about the wonders of the universe, expanding our minds one journey at a time. I'm Steve Cates. The Dr. Sky Experience continues as we move through time and space. To be fair to all the callers, and we do our very best to go to them, because that's what makes this radio show happen. Let's say good morning to Stu in Brooklyn. Stu?
Yeah, good morning, Dr. Cates. My oldest son is practically your neighbor. He lives in Scottsdale, and he's an amateur astronomer.
Yes,
he's teaching, introducing astronomy to kids.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get him a birthday present. His birthday is very soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking of getting Radio Sky, which goes into the radio wave idea, and how even someone in his class can be involved in that. What do you think of is that a good book? Would that work?
I think it would. I mean, I think it would, but let me talk, if you think this is a good offer, I mean, as far as a solution to this, I think another good thing that everybody as a young child, I think, would appreciate to explore the wonders of the sky. We always recommend people go to a pair of binoculars. And a reason for that is it's simple to use. You use both eyes, obviously. And a lot of things can happen. When I watched the eclipse just this past night here in Arizona, I had a small pair of binoculars, and I used those. Telescopes are good, but unless we really can sit down and show this, in other words, there's hardly anybody out there that teaches people how to use telescopes. I try to do it in the, public forums. So I think a pair of binoculars, good books like you're mentioning, or things like that, I think are awesome. But a pair of binoculars would be my answer on something like that. And that's something that I think everybody should have, and a good star chart to be able to see.
He's got a big Casimir. He's not a kid. He's a young man, about 57.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, this is the theater of the mind, so it's hard. I can't see.
I'm also laughing.
Okay.
I'm laughing because my K&E is almost 70 years old, and it never needed any batteries, even though 2 times 2 was 3.99.
There you go. Well, Stu, thank you so much for being part of the show. I hope you'll continue with us as we all learn things, as I do by listening to the great callers here. Let's see now, ladies and gentlemen. I think we had Paul in the Bronx. Paul, if you're there, before we go to our next guest, it's your time to talk on 77 WABC.
How you doing, sir? I'm a retired NYPD detective. I had the opportunity to meet the former MUFON director, Walter Andrus, in Texas about 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't lying. He wasn't crazy. He was looking for attention. I've interviewed, interrogated maybe hundreds, if not thousands, of people, and he was telling the truth. He saw something very, very real over the Great Lakes region during the World War II era.
Yes.
And as far as discs that were flying, and he said, we didn't have that technology then, we don't have it now. The government's lying to us. And there's a lot more out there, and I really appreciate that you're on the air and exposing all this.
Well, Paul, let me thank you for your service. I say this, like my brother and I here in Arizona, we did something called the Volunteer Posse. I know many people may go, what's that? Something out of the Wild West. And we went through the academy. We were, trained to carry firearms and rode with the deputy, and we did all the things that they would do. The civilians didn't know the difference. So what I'm saying, sir, and as far as your law enforcement background, I salute you, and I think a lot of cities, this is just an opinion for our American exceptionalism conversations, that would be a good thing for people to look at how to help and serve their community. It's a growing thing because so many of the things that we talk about here, well, I think common sense has become a very popular topic, wouldn't you think, Paul? And I appreciate your time right on this one. But as far as the UFO story, let me just conclude on that. We're going to talk about this in great detail. I've got a lot of background on this with the actual interviews and people that I knew, like Betty Hill of the Barney and Betty Hill case. I spent a lot of time with her. I'm a believer that we're not the only life form or whatever form in this universe. It's pretty simple to say, but I can't prove it. But we're going to go and get some really good guests on this program, as others have done on this radio station and continue to do, just like Luis Elizondo, the book Imminent. We're going to be talking about that subject. So thank you, sir, for your service and your interest. We'll talk about this UAP subject. Ladies and gentlemen, before our next break, we'd like to get in our next special guest here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Let's welcome Rod Bile. He's an author and a space journalist. This gentleman also, like our previous guest, has so much to say. And we say, first of all, good morning to you or good evening. You're out on the West Coast, so good evening, Rod. How are you?
Good evening. I'm good, and congratulations on the show. This is fantastic.
Well, thank you, my friend. And like I said, it's really about the guest, and I always mean this. I mean, people may go, oh, come on, Steve, Dr. Sky, you're being so humble. No, really, seriously, talking for hours on end, that's good. But the truth of the matter is, it makes this a living, breathing experience. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and I know, if I'm correct in this before I interrupt you, you're the editor-in-chief of Ad Astra magazine. That's a pretty powerful thing over time. And that's current, or am I saying you're past?
No, that's current. I've been doing it for 7 years, and we are primarily, we're published by the National Space Society, and it goes to members of the National Space Society, but we're also available in retail across the U.S. and Canada and libraries all over the world. So it's got a greatly increasing reach, partly because it's really good, I like to think, but also because a lot of the other space magazines have got out of business and sort of left us as the last man standing in the area.
Right. Well, you know something, maybe you knew the gentleman too, and I'm not bragging. It was a matter of an experience that I never will forget. If I'm correct, the National Space Society at one time, wasn't Hugh Downs either the director of that or the head of it? Am I correct in that? I think he was.
He was.
Yes.
And he was on the board of governors for decades, actually, up until his death.
Yes.
But the organization is actually an amalgamation of two earlier groups. One was the National Space Institute, started by Wernher von Braun back in the 70s. And the other was the L5 Society, which was started around the work of Jerry O'Neill. So, yeah, it's got some pretty strong origins.
Well, my beginning story, and it'll be very short here, is we became very close friends here. Hugh Downs would have him on shows, and I said this to him when he was in studio for the 100th anniversary of aviation. I said, welcome, Mr. Downs, to this very interesting day. And he looked at me and he said, sir, he didn't know me well. He said, call me you. My father was Mr. Downs, but I became very close to him, Rod, in the years, even to the assisted living that he lived in, all the way up to his death. Mm-hmm. I think he lived till 99. But another pioneer of space that we talk about, one who believed it. And every time he would come to the programs I was doing at senior communities, I was like just amazed. I mean, look at this guy who probably has, more time than any human being on television and radio. I think the Guinness Book of World Records once said that. That's amazing in itself. But this is about Rod Pyle, ladies and gentlemen. And talk to us about what you do, because so many of the books, like you have Curiosity Mars Rover, Amazing Stories of the Space Age. What got you interested? This is interesting. It's not everybody's passion. Tell me Rod Pyle's story.
It's not. So the quick and dirty version is I was enrolled in the astronomy department at UCLA in the 70s. And I made it up to differential calculus and the advanced astronomy class. And we had a parting of the ways, you might say, which is another way of saying I was not good at higher math. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be a lousy astronomer if I keep after this, but maybe I can tell stories.
Wow.
So
okay. You're an honest guy. I like
that. Led me, that ultimately led me to television. So I worked for the History Channel and Discovery for, 15 years, doing space documentaries, science fiction documentaries, things of that nature. And I really loved it. But you watch, if you've watched those channels, you know that the network comes to the producer and says, okay, tell us the story of the Apollo program in 44 minutes. And you're going, I can't even tell you the story of Apollo 11 in 44 minutes. Exactly. I mean, just talking to Buzz, I used to work with Buzz Aldrin quite a bit. Just talking to Buzz, one conversation's 4 hours because he's got so much to say.
Valuable
I ended up,
right? Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, it's incredible. So I ended up in 2005, I started writing books, and I realized that, they gave you the charter and said, go write your book, and left you alone for a year, and I thought, this is perfect. So I've written 20 of them since then and never looked back.
Well, that's awesome. I'll remind the listeners out there, the callers rule on these shows, and we do mean that. 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. We'll try our best to get through and answer as many of the questions, more so in the role of our guests than myself, per se, if you want to direct those questions to the guest. But this is interesting. We're going to come up on a break in just a little while, but I want to get a little more experience on this. And maybe you need to think about this in greater detail, because I am really kind of just tired of hearing that the mainstream media with the term stuck in space. And I said to myself, wait a minute, these individuals, Sonny and our good friend Butch, these are trained pilots. These are test pilots. They don't back away from challenges. They kind of know all this kind of stuff. So give us the short take, and when we come back in a few minutes from the break, we'll get into it deeper. What's the misnomer here, if I have it correctly, about lost or trapped in space? It's not a Lost in Space episode, right?
No.
Tell us
the problem. The problem was, as we know, the Boeing Starliner capsule had problems, and it probably wasn't entirely safe to bring them back in that.
Right.
So they brought it back empty, uncrewed, and left them up there. Now, when you're a professional astronaut, you know that every time you strap on a rocket, your life hangs in the balance. So you're already ready for that. Mm-hmm. Staying at the space station for an extra few months is not a big deal. And I have to tell you, having interviewed dozens of these people, of astronauts, I never met one that didn't want to spend more time in space. They don't want to come home. They love it up there, and they're really busy. There's a lot of research going on and a lot of work and maintenance. So they're okay, and they've said they're okay publicly. Mm-hmm. So this narrative is not accurate, and unfortunately it's been magnified by the administration of Mr. Musk, and we can talk about that later if you want.
Sure. Interesting. No, I mean, it's fascinating because, all right, in the quick time that we have before this break, and we'll get it in afterwards, I promise, with the listeners. We have people on the line that want to ask questions, hopefully of you. But here we go. So this whole thing about, I never understood this. They go up with one of the Crew Dragons, And they're saying now that simply, Rod, the spacesuits of Starliner are not compatible to that of the Crew Dragon. So what's the missing part? Yes. Who brought up the extra spacesuits, and did they? And now this crew, the two, Suni and Butch, are supposed to come back maybe as early as the middle of next week. Where's the missing spacesuit thing that I've never read about? What do you know about that?
Well, the Boeing spacesuits, the Boeing spacesuits and the SpaceX spacesuits are entirely different designs. The interface with the capsule is different. Mm-hmm. It is just something that wasn't standardized and probably should have been, and I think will be in the future. So they had to fly up 2 extra suits for them so that they could come home in the Dragon capsule. And as you know, that we talked earlier, that launched today, so we're in good shape to come home in a couple of days.
Well, not to cut you short, sir, and all the people that want to join the conversation, we're coming up on another one of our breaks. Important breaks, ladies and gentlemen, that, of course, keep this radio show going and many other things. But let's say this in simple English. We'll be right back after these important announcements here on the Dr. Sky Experience, our debut show here. Hopefully you're enjoying it, and so the listeners and callers are calling in saying they do appreciate it. We're on 77 WABC as we expand our minds one journey at a time through the time and space continuum. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for an Oikos remix. Like a crunchy storm of sea salt praline pretzels, dark chocolate, and butter toffee, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Oikos Remix varieties with epic mix-ins and 11 grams of complete protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See RemixYogurt.com.
So good, so good, so good.
Great gifts for mom? We've got them. And they're up to 60% off at Nordstrom Rack stores now.
You know they have Marc Jacobs?
Gotta show mom some love.
That is so good.
Snag amazing deals on Mother's Day gifts from Barefoot Dreams, Kate Spade New York, and more. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
We're shipping Mother's Day gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes. My gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it?
Yes.
Guarantee it?
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Visit the UPSstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product, services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS store. Visit a store today.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
19 minutes after the hour, and we thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on our debut show, the Dr. Sky Experience. Our special guest in this particular hour, part of the hour, is space journalist and author Rod Pyle. But first, let's go to the callers because we recognize the importance of our callers and respect that. Let's go to Sam in Las Vegas, Nevada. Good morning. You're on the air, I presume. How you doing?
Well, first of all, I had no idea what to expect tonight, and I'm very glad that you're on.
Well, thank you.
Because I give myself time to think about what I'm doing with my own life.
Okay.
But also, the radio station, I believe, is going through some changes, and AM radio is going through some changes.
It sure has, right.
Most of my radio, like I listen to you on a phone.
Yes.
And even though they used to say that the next best thing to being there is a phone call, and I'm actually feeling like I'm there all the time, because most of the time when I have my phone on, I'm listening to 77 WABC.
Well, thank you so much for that. But let me also say something, Sam, that you may not know. The power of AM radio, as many people know. You know, I'm 69 years young, and I grew up with it. And a lot of the younger folks today, if they look at some of the vehicles, there's not this emphasis, and we hope there is. But kudos to the owner and operator of this particular radio station, John Catsimatidis. He and a lot of other people also campaigned very strongly to keep AM radio in place, because it is not only for the sake of hearing this radio station and others, it's also used in the defense in case of an emergency. It has an emergency warning system, that goes across the country. And so many people, get their news and information from stations that are on the AM band. But do you have any question or comment for our guest? I mean, this is interesting, but I thank you for your comment.
Oh, no, I don't have any comment, but I hope that John Catsimatidis understands there's a lot of people outside of New York City, especially out here in the West, where we're losing a lot of AM stations.
Oh, you bet.
Used to advertise this station online so people can pick it up and get to hear you and get to hear the station.
Well, that's very kind. And one of my goals, I don't know if this will come to fruition, it's one step at a time and earning it, is to be able to do these live remotes from locations out here in the West. And, when you see the banner of 77 WABC on the table and people look and scratch their head and say, wait a minute, that's not the local station. And no disrespect to the local stations, but if they're killing out the AM stations, hey, we're going to pull in, bring in more people and bring in more opportunity for people to hear this particular station. And look at all the great hosts they have here. This is incredible. Talking not only about the science that we're talking about, but truth, justice, and the American way and American exceptionalism. And Sam, with that, thank you. I hope you'll stay with us in the future and call us back. Thank you so much. Let's go back to Rod, the main emphasis of this particular portion of the hour, a space journalist and such. Rod, let's talk a little bit about this. We were talking about the spacesuits that it came up because the non-compatibility between Starliner and this whole particular space endeavor with the Crew Dragon. What do you think the future of Starliner is? And I don't mean to knock Boeing. That's not fair to say. I have no, axe to grind here. But what do you think the future of that? Are they going to look at canceling that, or are there so much in debt on this? I have no idea. What say you on Starliner?
Yeah. Well, last year alone, they lost close to $2 billion on it. So word on the street, not official, is that they're trying to sell the division or see if they can cancel the program. Now, it would be a shame because they've done a ton of work on this. And we know Boeing, the weird thing is this wasn't the first time out for them, okay? They built the first stage of the Saturn V. They built a big percentage of the space shuttle. They, of course, build airliners. So they have a lot of experience in this kind of thing. So Starliner should not have been a big challenge, but a lot of people who are industry observers, this isn't, anything I've done any research on, it's what I read in the trades, feel that once they move their headquarters away from the shops in Washington, up in Seattle, that the company really began to struggle. And as they like to say, the bean counters took over. I don't know if that's really the case. That's what people are saying who are insiders. And that money became paramount. So when you start hearing things like, well, our first flight of Starliner failed because the software was wrong, that's not something that happens easily. You have to kind of work to foul that up. You've got people, look at JPL. We've got people that programmed the Voyagers 45 years ago, and they're still working. So this is something we know how to do. So I think the problem with Starliner was, Boeing also built the SLS, the Space Launch System, and that is working fine, but that was a cost-plus bid. So basically they got their money plus anything more they needed. Starliner was a fixed-price one, and a company like SpaceX has prospered under fixed costs. Starliner has not. So the future is uncertain. I think they may fly a few more times. The big problem they have is we don't have that many more years on the space station. It's only up there for another 5 years or so.
How right you are.
They can get Starliner going pretty quick. It may not have a mission.
Let's jump across the pond here, and let's talk a little bit about this from one coast to the other, let's say. Let's talk about NASA's Artemis moon rocket. I mentioned before that Anne McClain, who's now the commander of this particular journey to space on this Crew Dragon 10, she's been mentioned as possibly one of the first female astronauts to go to the moon, and maybe more so than others. But let me get your quick take, look-see on the Artemis program. Look at all the things Musk has done. Well, some of his rockets are blowing up. What do you think the future of Artemis is as another way to get to space?
Well, so Artemis, and this is the feeling of a lot of people I talk to at NASA, because I have friends from when I worked at the field centers and so forth. The overall prevailing feeling of the people I've talked to is it's not perfect, but the SLS Space Launch System is the moon rocket we have. It's worked, it works. It'll probably continue working. It's reliable. It's very old, proven technology. It's expensive as hell. It's over $4 billion a flight.
You bet.
Which tops the shuttle, which was already expensive at probably $2.8 billion adjusted dollars for today's money. But it works, and we have the components for a number of them sitting around, and we have one stacking right now. So if they were to come ask me what they ought to do, which I don't think they will, I would say,
but we're asking, right?
Yeah. So let's suggest to them, if anybody's listening that is concerned about this, let's suggest to them they fly out the hardware they have, fly Artemis 2 next year, which is going to orbit the moon and not land, then fly Artemis 3, which is our first landing. Now, we got a problem there because we don't have a landing craft yet. SpaceX was supposed to provide the first lunar lander with Starship in a lunar lander configuration. And as you've seen, they're nowhere close to getting that thing to fly the way they need it to. So they're becoming a pacing item. We also don't have EVA suits for the moon. We haven't built a lunar excursion suit, something capable for working on the lunar surface since 1972. There's a company working on them, but they're behind schedule. Blue Origin's supposed to be building another moon lander that will come into use later, but they're taking their time. So we got a couple of problems here. SLS is behind schedule. The whole Artemis program is underfunded. They keep moving money around. And we've got China breathing down our necks. Now, they've been working on their lunar program for about 7 years. They have declared as of last year that their lander's ready, their spacecraft is ready, their suits are ready. And even though we don't always trust everything that comes out of the Chinese government's mouth, they have no reason to lie. And I can assure you, NASA's talking now we're supposed to land on the moon in 24, then it was 25, now they're saying 27 with 70% confidence, which isn't very inspiring. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking 28 or 29, and I can assure you that China will take any risk necessary to land by 2029 because that's the 80th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic, and they love anniversaries like that.
Wow, that's interesting.
So we got a
big, thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the second space race here, and there's a lot of geopolitical capital at stake.
Yeah, that's incredible, Rod. What's your website? I mean, we're obviously going to hold you over here for more time because we want to hear about what you have to say. But how do people get in touch with you? I mean, you've written so many books, and you're like, I could describe you. You're a deep researcher on these things. I mean, these are not just books you were describing off air to me today. That some of these take, a year maybe to get to compile and actually get them to be printed and put into publication. So how do they get in touch with you if they're interested? And I'm sure they are.
My website is rodpilebooks.com, just that one word. Mm-hmm. And I can also be reached through the National Space Society, and their website is nss.org.
Right, and it's Rod.
I'm all over the place in the web. PYLE.
No, I understand. Right, PYLE
like Gomer.
PILE. Right, just to make that clarification. Yeah. No, it's very interesting, and I've followed you for years. I know we both know each other, ladies and gentlemen. These are not strangers, but we try to go and get the best. And I'm giving you a super compliment here, and it's sincere. We go after people that really know their stuff, and I really mean that. So all this passion. But once again, before we go to this next break, what's that inspiration about this? It's not everybody's. I haven't written a book yet. I'd love to. I'm not going to ask you for ideas on how to do it. But that's my own project. But
we can talk.
Oh, well, that's okay. But I mean, in this time with all the guests out here that we're going to bring on here, it's more important about the guests. But what's this motivation for you in simple English? When did it start? Just tell me. Tell the listeners. With this whole space.
Honestly, like you, I grew up during the space age, and that was a magical time. I mean, by the time you and I were in our early teens, we were seeing these incredible missions of exploration thundering off the launch pad as often as every 10 weeks. Each one more daring and amazing than the last. And it was just an incredible time to be alive. And a few years ago, I was lecturing to a group of young aerospace students, and I was talking about the space race era and what it was like. And suddenly I stopped because this girl in the front row started to sob. And I said, I'm sorry, did I say something? And she said, you have no idea how lucky you were to be alive then. And I thought, it's right. That was an amazing time. So that was the inspiration. And every book is a guilty pleasure.
Right. And unfortunately, the time limits us on many of these things. But here we go. People don't know this. I collect all the space memorabilia. I'm sure you do. the other day I found at a store, amazing, for those that love G.I. Joe, the actual Mercury capsule with a silver-suited astronaut. Oh, that thing's awesome, and I'm never going to sell it because I'm just like many. I'm a kid at heart for this stuff, and we do love it. More to come, ladies and gentlemen.
You know what they're worth, right?
Oh, absolutely. But I'm not doing it just for the sake of reselling it. It's just so cool. Right from where I am in my living room, I have don't laugh, folks, I have a Barbie doll of Sally Ride. The first American woman. But they never made one of Valentina Tereshkova yet. I don't think so. So there you go. The first
I don't think so, and they
should.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, folks, we're coming up on the next break here on this very interesting adventure in time and space. What do we call it? The Dr. Sky Experience, where you're listening to 77 WABC. We're expanding our minds one journey at a time. And our very special guest is Rob Pyle. You can reach him, of course, at Pyle, Pyle, books.com. And more with him when we come back on this most amazing, well, I like to say, our debut show here. I hope you're finding it amazing. And we'll be right back after these important announcements.
The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, 34 minutes after the hour, we appreciate your time more than you can imagine here. Always great guests from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, and weather. And also, our conversation will contain interesting information on American exceptionalism. Good reasons to talk about America, our sacred Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our sacred Second Amendment rights. That's for another time. But now, Rod Pyle, our very special guest, as we move through this particular hour. He's a space journalist and an author of so many books. You can reach him at Pyle, Pyle, Rod, welcome back. I wanted to ask you this. This is so amazing to me, and I never really got a firm, idea and answer. When these astronauts come back, when Sonny and Butch come back, we're hearing stories that they're simply not going to be able to walk. Not that they're debilitated for life, but the rigors of space are pretty powerful. To talk about that, I mean, imagine being up there that long. What happens to the body in best way you can explain it?
So they've been up there just under 9 months, which is a long stretch when you were fighting for 2 weeks, I admit. Mm-hmm. Microgravity is tough on the human body. So there's a bunch of stuff that happens. Now, the space station is low enough that it's not affected by radiation, which is good. So radiation is not a problem. If you go beyond Earth orbit, then radiation becomes a huge problem, and cancer and so forth. So that's something we're working on. They're working on. In their case, the bones weaken over time. They begin to become a little more brittle. So they exercise between 2 and 2.5 hours a day just to keep that from being a problem. So that won't affect them. But the muscle atrophy, the fluids in the body move towards the center because there's no gravity pulling them down. So they tend to have stuffy heads all the time. Hot sauce and sriracha is very popular on the space station. Otherwise,
didn't know
they
that.
Can't taste much.
Wow.
Yeah. And
that's funny.
So it's hard for them to walk. And a lot of the astronauts say, it takes them a couple of weeks to remember that you can't just, if you're holding a glass of water, you can't just let go of it and have it float there. So they drop stuff with a fair amount of frequency. One of the bigger problems that we're finding, and this is really weird, it affects mostly male astronauts, not women,
really,
is that the focus of their eyes change. So there's something about ocular pressure, either because of the pressure in the brain or in the eye itself, that the eyes will start to defocus, and most of the astronauts coming back need glasses. Sometimes it fixes itself, sometimes it doesn't. And their red blood cell count changes. There's a lot of small stuff, but the big one is muscular atrophy.
Wow.
And just
that's
reorienting
amazing,
yourself to being at a gravitational field. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I heard another story. I mean, I had at one time, and I don't want to talk myself into one, visual aura migraines. And that to me bothers me because, let's say doing this radio show, I would get this rainbow effect that would come across my vision and literally block out the central field of vision. But enough about me. But I'm hearing that a lot of astronauts in space, the cosmic rays, seemingly, and so the Apollo astronauts I've heard, saw all these flashes of light even when they closed their eyes to sleep. So isn't that a concern too? I imagine long-duration space missions, a lot of medical issues could arise.
So Buzz Aldrin was one of the first people to bring that up, but he theorized that he was seeing these white pops of light, even when his eyes were closed during the sleep periods, probably being cosmic rays. Now, in space, there's two kinds of radiation primarily. There's the radiation coming from the sun, which is generally okay unless you have big coronal mass eruption, and then you've got to find a way to protect yourself. Hopefully you've got shielding sufficient for that. And then there's cosmic rays that come from outside the solar system, as you well know. They're heavy particles, and those are the ones that are the most dangerous. And the problem with spacecraft is when a cosmic ray hits a metal hull, it spalls and can end up ejecting 4 or 5 particles on the other side inside the crew compartment.
Oh, boy.
So it actually can be more dangerous to be inside than out in your spacesuit. There is some theorization that the radiation may have deleterious effects on metal processes. So we're concerned about this long voyage to Mars that Elon Musk wants to do, for instance, and NASA's been talking about for decades.
Yes.
That amount of radiation exposure, you may end up having an addled crew trying to land because they're having cerebral problems. So this is all stuff that has to be looked into. There was a recent development, however, on radiation shielding that's very promising. It's a kind of gel, sort of like aerogel, that absorbs, it's very light, but it absorbs water really effectively. And they think if they can jacket the spacecraft interior with that stuff and inject it with water, that the water is sufficient shielding, but this gel holds it in place so it doesn't slosh around. And then, of course, as you're transiting from Earth to Mars or wherever you're going, you can actually use some of that for drinking and cooking and making oxygen and so forth. So that's very promising.
Very interesting, Rod. Let's go to the callers, but remember, ladies and gentlemen, this number in perpetuity, 1-800-848-9222. And I don't know if Tony in Clifton is still on the line, but good morning if you are, and hope you are. Good morning, Tony. Are you with us?
Hi, Dr. Sky. Yes, I am. I'm so delighted to have you as part of our early Saturday morning repertoire. I'm excited, and I really do have to commend John Catsimatidis on this election.
Thank you for the comment, and many thanks to Mr. Catsimatidis and the staff for WABC. We appreciate that greatly. I know we've spoken before in the other side of midnight conversations, but you have a question, I gather I'm reading here. But please tell us more about what your question is.
So, of course, you know that our new president has plans for Mars. And as a baby boomer and as a 60s grew up with the space programs, as you guys were talking about, great show. The Day Mars Invaded Earth was a movie. What's interesting, Dr. Sky, is that we really, as this becomes more of a thing that can happen, I do think about, the movies that we've seen, the limited information that we have on all these people that say they were captured by aliens. And you wonder what these people are really like. We know what we're dealing with here on Earth with all our different countries, which is exciting enough. But to think about Mars, my thoughts, and one of the best movies there was, and we always talk about movies when I call you, is The Day Mars Invaded Earth. It's about a astronaut, and they even from NASA, so you see the whole movie and how it was in the 60s. And he's an astronaut who goes out and he has this exciting little trip and somehow this thing comes back, these Martians come back to Earth, and they want to replicate, this sort of intelligence that's out there.
Yes.
Dr. Sky, what do you think? I mean, we want to be excited about it, just like we do when we think about Bitcoins and all other new stuff that's coming out. But when we think of the intelligence, movies has not been very
no, they
nice
haven't.
About the people.
They haven't, Tony. And not to cut you short here. In the limited time, God bless, this is a great conversation. I want to get Rod into this, too. That is interesting. Okay. We seem to have aliens. They're always these horrible monsters that want to eat us alive and kill us. And again, it was great money makers for the B movies, which I love all those B sci-fi movies. But let's hope we don't know that life in the universe is somehow, maybe it doesn't have that kind of chew 'em up and eat 'em up kind of concept. Maybe there's something even more intelligent than us, and they're kind of, shying away from us because they realize we simply can't get along. But, Tony, thank you. The last word goes to Rod. Rob, and I want to give Rob a chance, to respond to that, and I do appreciate it. Thank you, Tony. Go ahead, Rob. Tell us what you think about this whole existence of evil aliens.
Yeah, so I'll answer a little tangentially. I mean, just talking about life on Mars in general and any threat that it might be, even at a cellular level, you've probably been following the Mars sample return saga. JPL's been working on it for years. Mm-hmm. They were called on the carpet by NASA headquarters saying, what's this really going to cost? Now, what JPL said, and I have this on authority from people there who were part of that report to headquarters, they said, we think it will cost between 6.5 and 11 billion.
Whoa, wow.
Then when Bill Nelson comes out and gives his Friday afternoon press conference, which is always a bad sign when they do it on Friday afternoon, he says, 11 billion is too much. We want to see if private industry could do it cheaper. So Mars sample returns on hold. Now, a big part of that expense is being very careful about containing this stuff. So when you scoop up these samples, which they've already done with the Perseverance rover, they're sealed in little titanium tubes. When you go with another rover and fetch those and launch them back up into orbit, you've got all these steps of decontamination and sterilization, UV light, chemicals, all the same stuff they did to Viking when they landed that in the 70s to make sure we didn't end up landing there and detecting our own Earth germs. So there's a lot of caution around that. In terms of intelligent beings, and it would be great. I mean, my movie in that conversation was The War of the Worlds, of course, which kept me up for 3 nights as a kid, terrified they were going to land any minute.
Scary. The
1953 version. Oh, it was incredible. But, you talk to, so I shadowed the chief scientist on the Curiosity mission for about a year and a half when I was writing that book. And we talked about this a little bit. I said, there's a lot of people interpreting a lot of these images from the surface in various ways. And he leaned over, and he was a really candid guy. Geologists, always the suspenders and the flannel shirts. They're just very real people. And he said, Rod, we all dream of that dinosaur bone moment. If we found a tibia up there from something, our funding problems would be over forever. So they would love to find an artifact, whether it was a bone, a microbe, a fossil of a microbial mat, or a building would be great.
Well, I hope they
so
do.
Far,
I hope they do, Rod. And I don't mean to cut you short, but the clock rules. But no, I want to thank you so much. Let's stay in touch on these issues because I think you bring a lot to the table, a lot. And again, it's Pyle, PYLEbooks.com. No, ladies and gentlemen, here's people that talk about this stuff, but they walk it. They just don't talk it. So thank you, Rod Pyle, for being a friend and being on the Dr. Sky Experience on our debut show. Thank you so much, sir, and good morning.
Thanks. Anytime, and again, congratulations.
Thank you. Let's bring on another guest, ladies and gentlemen, a gentleman that I've known for many years, Richard Dugan, a radio host in the western part of the United States with a great, great story to tell. His entire program that you'd be hearing is called Tell Me Your Story. And I hope the good communication gods favor us that we have Richard Dugan on the line. Richard, good morning or good evening to you. How are you?
Well, here on the West Coast, it is good evening. How am I coming through? Sounding good okay today?
Loud and clear, my friend, and I appreciate your time here. This is interesting. Hey. We go back a long time, but, just keeping as the clock runs.
Over 25 years.
Oh, absolutely, brother. And you know this, but here's why we have you here. And I hope we can do this in a more lengthy, this is more like an introduction to what's to come in the future on the Dr. Sky Experience. You talk about in your Tell Me Your Story, you talk now, this is interesting, from the science side, we talk about time, we talk about space, we talk about physics, quantum physics. You delve more into the metaphysical side of the world. And I guess the big question that needs to be asked, and we can't answer it on this show, is what the heck do we mean by consciousness and reality? So tell us some of the experiences that you've had with great guests over the years. And I'm fascinated by this. It's not my area of expertise, but carry on. Richard Dugan, otherwise known as Dr. D of Tell Me Your Story. Educate us on some of this.
And I'll actually add something to that. It's actually Reverend Dr. D. The doctor part, I play a doctor on radio, but the Reverend part is legitimate.
Yes.
As far as consciousness is concerned, and this is, it's a challenge for a lot of folks who have a vested interest, if you will, in a particular philosophy. That's what I call the diverse religions.
Mm-hmm.
And it requires us to sort of let go for a period of time our current beliefs to consider other possibilities. Consciousness, from my perspective, is that it almost is epitomized by the phrase, I think, therefore I am. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. I encourage people on my program, on every program, to take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to spend time going within and listening to what many of the ancient wisdom teachings tell us is that still small voice. And there is also a philosopher, not a philosopher, maybe he's a therapist, what have you, Jung. I think he was the one who basically said there is one mind in the universe, and we're all part of it.
You bet.
To me, the consciousness that exists is that which we are all a part of. And in spite of the fact that we all want our individuality, the reality is we're all connected.
You know, you bring up a good point with this connection, Richard, and not to cut you short here.
Yeah.
You know, we had a nice relationship with Dr. Edgar Mitchell of Apollo 14. And he's the only basic astronaut in the astronaut corps. You and I both know this. The listeners may not. That claimed to have an out-of-body experience on the way to the moon. Now, before people laugh and go, well, that's ridiculous. These are the right stuff kind of people. No, this is an MIT graduate, a test pilot, a serious astronaut on board Apollo 14. And we spoke, and I sat down and I listened more than I spoke. And he was the head of this group called the Noetic Institute. And maybe people look that up and say, wow, this is deep stuff. But his main premise was this. We all live in something called a quantum hologram. And I said, wow, this is getting heavy, Dr. Mitchell, among all the things they did on the moon. So he was telling me that every single thing in life that he looks at in his studies in physics and quantum physics is all interconnected. So if you had this big map on the wall, like a big whiteboard, you could see even the butterfly, the tree, the human, the vehicle. Everything has some sort of a pathway. So isn't this basically the same kind of concept of interconnectivity? But from a scientific standpoint, we don't even know enough about relativistic, relativity. And how does it mate into quantum physics? And that's a deep subject for this early in the morning, but maybe not. So what say you? What say you?
Well, I'll do the best I can to keep it brief. There's a wonderful example in a book. It is my metaphysical primer called Autobiography of a Yogi, where Paramahansa is taken into a theater, basically, and was not real impressed. So as he and his guru are leaving the theater, they're standing outside. His guru says, I think I have a better film, if you will, to use a current nomenclature. And he gives him a thump hard on the chest. And all of a sudden, he is aware of everything around him. And I mean everything.
Well, let me stop you for a second let me stop you for a moment, if you don't mind, sir. We're coming up on another break here, the last break of the 2-hour show right now. But when we come back, a little bit more as we explore even this albeit very short time with our very special guest here, guest number 3, Richard Dugan, who talks about subject matter that are very deep in the metaphysical world. Tell me your story. We'll be right back here on the Dr. Sky Experience on Talk Radio 77 WABC.
The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Well, 53 minutes after the hour. Sorry to go here, but we're so grateful to owner and operator John Catsimatidis' family and the executive staff that makes this radio station possible, along with the other great hosts that you hear on this particular station 24/7. What are we doing in attempting to expand our minds one journey at a time? More to come. And our guest, albeit a very short time, is one that we'll be talking to in the future, I'm sure. Richard Dugan, a radio program that he has that you obviously can join in on. Tell me your story. So, Richard, as you know, as we go to the top of the hour here, how do people get in touch with what you're talking about to hear these experiences? So hopefully when the next time we have you back, we can actually pick a topic and a subject and explore it in depth with the listeners, and they need to know the number, as always. And if we didn't get to you today in this early morning, we do apologize. 1-800-848-9222. Keep that number ready to dial in future iterations of the Dr. Sky Experience. How do people get in touch with you and a little more on your show?
Well, first of all, operators are standing by. I want to congratulate you. Secondly, I'll answer your question in a moment, but I'll congratulate you on this incredible opportunity, and I'm excited to sort of ride your coattails to coin the phrase. People can get a hold of me through my website, which is richarddugan.com. And, of course, that's RICHARDDUGAN.com. And I have been doing this. I've been in this business for 45 years. I was 19. And I can't tell you how much fun I am having with this stuff. AM radio in general is not going away. I can
Amen to that, my friend. You bet.
Say that. Yeah.
And especially the power of AM radio, as this radio station owner, has fought, and very valiantly, and in a business way. Don't get rid of AM radio.
Yeah.
And listen how many people listen to it, the multitudes of people who depend on it. It's part of their life, like many listeners to this show. Many people at night that, let's say they're up, they work, they can't sleep. They want to listen. They want to have somebody who's their friend. And that's what this is all about. Yeah. So thank you.
Well,
so I appreciate your time there. Go ahead.
Sure. I was going to say, growing up in Phoenix, I used to listen to KGO in San Francisco at night because the signal would skip. And tonight, I'm actually listening to 77 ABC off of my my AM radio because of the skip. And I am kidding about that. I don't think the signal would come quite this far west.
Hey, you never know. We're heard out into the cosmos. And as Larry Kudlow, one of the best financial people in the world, he even talks about, blasting all the way out into the Milky Way and beyond. But, Richard, thank you. I hate to cut you short, but excuse me, I appreciate your time. And do have a good evening, and we'll look forward. And especially the Irish Dugan, happy St. Patrick's Day to you and the clan. There you go.
Well, and to you, Sláinte.
Let's see if we have some of our callers on the line here. We'll continue to the top of the hour. If Joe's been waiting in New Jersey. Joe, good morning. Are you on the line? And your question, of course, is important. Go ahead.
Yes. First of all, you got a fabulous show. Unbelievable.
Oh, thank you. You're so kind.
Thank you for all you're bringing to us. Mr. Dugan really blew my mind. Did he write any books?
He did, and I'm sorry I don't have it in front of me, but you can. Are you still on the line?
Tell you?
Yeah, he's there.
I'm still here. The book is called Choices, 5 Steps for Life. And I even talk a little bit about what, Dr. Scott and I have been talking about even this evening. It's about making choices. We're always doing it. And you talked about that interconnectedness, Doc. That's part of it. If we choose to accept that we are connected, we become more, I believe, we become more responsible in our own lives, in what we do and say and even think, that we know that it's going to have an impact on especially the people around us. Yes, Choices, 5 Steps for Life. You can even go to my website, richarddugan.com. I have a link that takes you to Amazon. The biggest challenge I have right now is getting the Audible version up on the
what
Amazon
we're going to do before we wrap up the show, and we make this commitment to the listeners, we'll get all these different individuals that we have as guests as we're building social media here in a strong way that you'll have that. So thank you, Richard. But let me go back to you really quickly, Joe. I mean, you had a question because we're almost out of time, and I do appreciate it. Go ahead, sir.
I have so many questions. You have such a great show. But see, I'm blind. I'll have to go on his website and see if I can get his audio book,
Well, blessings to you, sir.
Because I'm very much in tune with what he's saying. But getting back to the astronauts, I have a question. Mentally and physically, how much of an adjustment do they have to make when they come back? And is it long-term disability that they might experience or not?
Joe, the simplest answer, and I hope you'll call again, we can get into this in greater detail. They do have experiences that do require, some astronauts came back to require some medical treatment. They basically can't walk when they come back. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you, and we leave the show with these words from the poet Dylan Thomas. Do not go gentle into that good night. Don't give up. Do all to save our own species. Do not give up on what you want to achieve. Those words are very important. Signing off until next time as we move through time and space. See you on the next adventure of the Dr. Sky Experience. Happy St. Patrick's Day and health and happiness to each and every one of you. And thanks to Kevin and staff back at Ground Zero navigating this big starship experience and powerhouse in radio.